Hey, everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here from GeekCast Radio, doing another must-read comic video where I go through a comic that I think is one of the best books and tell you why you must read it. Today, I will be discussing Muhammad Ali, not the person, but the book about the person. And I'm not going to try to pronounce the names of the people who wrote and drew this because I will butcher them. If you check the show notes, you will see it there. And part of the reason I'm unable to say those names correctly is because they're French and I can barely speak English, let alone another language. And what I find really intriguing about this is going into this, I had no idea it was actually, this is a French book that was translated, and you never would have guessed that. And this obviously is the biography of the life of Muhammad Ali, but that's really just gives you a small indication of what this book is about, and really utilizes the life of Muhammad Ali as really the focal point to everything that was happening around him in the world during that time frame and how it impacted him. And there's one small change that this does that makes it much more intimate than most of your biography stories. It makes it much more personable, and that's the way it's written. And the way it's written is that it's actually written as if someone's speaking to Muhammad Ali. And I'll give you an example of this from the opening line. "You came into this world in Kentucky on January 17th, 1942. Your parents had bought a house for $4,500 in one of the city's 3 black ghettos where the middle class lived." And it's something like basically telling Muhammad Ali about his life, what happened. And it feels like, you're the ultimate fly on the wall, that you're part of a conversation you shouldn't be. It gets more into the emotional center of who Ali was and what he felt at the time. And in a way, when I was reading this, I thought, okay, this must be written by a relative, someone who knew him throughout his life. Like, how this can't be someone, an outsider just doing research, but that was the case. And it does give you really everything you could ever want to know about Muhammad Ali, beginning with his childhood, getting to where he grew up, who his parents were, and why he became the boxer he was. But also a big piece of this is utilizing, especially many of the issues that were occurring during the civil rights movement of the time. He was a focal figure in that, and who he was and why Muhammad Ali, who became Muhammad Ali, is we see that story being told. And I think that's the key word there is story. And this feels like a story. Sometimes a biography can be like a series of events being told to you, like a textbook or like a checklist of things that happened, and the person can be left behind. And this, it's not, because it's like I mentioned, it's like learning about who he was through his own words, or someone else's words who saw what happened, and like why he made the decisions that he did. Obviously, some creative license is taken, but it does give it that really great impact. And I do, I love the art in this. And every time I turned the page, I felt like, okay, what are they going to do next? Like, how are they going to utilize, real life events, from his being in the Olympics, how he became, how his persona was defined, why he chose Islam, like why did that happen, like why did that occur, but also getting into kind of the background of learning that much about his personality was due to learning, watching something like wrestling and seeing the characters there, and again getting into the history of the time, things like John F. Kennedy's assassination, Malcolm X, and learning about the friendship that he formed with Malcolm X, in which I didn't honestly even know that occurred. It also makes you kind of realize, when you go back and think about it, the Muhammad Ali, the person, he was one of the most recognizable people in the world, very outspoken. And this is a time where, as I mentioned, you had the John F. Kennedy assassination. You had a lot of horrible things occurring, and he legitimately, some of the choices he was making put his life on the line. And I think the quote on the back by Martin Luther King Jr. kind of indicates it all, that no matter what you think of Mr. Muhammad Ali's religion, you certainly have to admire his courage. And I think that you walk away from that certainly leaving that, seeing everything that he was up against, and kind of the way the world was. And even when it gets into stuff like boxing, which it certainly doesn't shy away from, it looks phenomenal. The way it gets into this is a round by round breakdown of the fight, what happened. This, again, the detail, the information is, even if you feel like you know everything about Muhammad Ali, like one of my favorite movies of all time is When We Were Kings, which is a documentary about Muhammad Ali and his fight with George Foreman. And that's just like one small piece of his life. This is like the ultimate like 30 for 30 documentary about Muhammad Ali. But again, it doesn't just feel like you're getting information dumped on you. You feel like you're learning a lot about who he was, what the world was like. Like you're going through his life bit by bit, like you were there. Which is hard to do, which I think is a way something that comics can do in this sense, where you're getting the visuals, you're getting kind of what it looked like, but also kind of the words as well, which is something that no other medium can do. As we see, just the violence that was happening, what was happening around him, but still he was going forward. Now, is it glorifying Muhammad Ali? Is it, does it shy away from the things that he did that maybe perhaps he wasn't proud of? No, I think it does give you a complete picture of the man. He wasn't, he was a human being. He did things that were perhaps not, not all morally correct, especially with like his wife and other women and things like that. But I think it just showcases that ultimately, no one's that by doing that, you see the complete person. It's not necessarily about hero worship. It's just about understanding, who he was and why he was such an enormous figure at this time, getting into things like that infamous Esquire cover and why that happened, the kind of the backstory behind it. And again, just throughout, just from each year going through it, and really, if like someone who enjoys learning about U.S. history, especially history of the '60s, it's a good indication just of how turmoil the world was at that time. I think it's something we don't even think about, take for granted in a way, not realizing that within a few years you had John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and as well as Robert Kennedy, all assassinated in brutal fashion in such a within one decade, and knowing just the vocal person that Muhammad Ali was. So if you're a person that likes biographies, if you're a person that likes history, if you're a person like likes learning about key figures, like this is, I think, a great story. Like this is a book I would maybe pick up at doing like a book report in grade school, but then actually like enjoy it and think, oh man, this is amazing. This is actually fascinating read that gives you so much, and you walk away, I think, just realizing why he is known as the greatest. And it does things that movies like Ali, I think, failed to do by giving you more perspective. And sometimes you learn about the character, you don't learn about the man. And this, you think you learn about it all. So yeah, I definitely would say a must read for any sports fan, anyone that feels like you've learned everything you possibly could behind Muhammad Ali. Now, is this going to have some sort of reveal of information that no one ever knew about? No, I mean, you're dealing with what really happened, but it condenses it all and presents it in a way that is compelling from beginning to end. So my only wish is that this is kind of a smaller version of it, that this should be like an oversized edition, because there is so much information on these pages that I think like having it blown up, like something like that, having it much larger and bigger, it calls for it. Like this book should be twice the size that it is. And I read this digitally, and it actually reads better digitally because of that, because with a bigger screen, this I think is meant for something like that. So having it, so I don't know the choice of it. This is done by Dark Horse. I don't know if originally when it was produced in its home country, if it was a larger edition. Usually European comics, they're much more common to have larger editions, but for some reason that wasn't the case. But anyways, that'll be it for me. Remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching.